Howdy, brothers. So, I want to talk about classical Latin a little bit. I studied classical Latin from a Catholic teacher, an Irish Catholic woman, in my high school for 4 years, and I even got a couple awards for our state, the state of Ohio. So, I think I learned it for a good deal of time, and I had some authority on it, I guess. But I forgot it immediately after getting out of high school, and there's a reason for that. And this also relates to what I was saying about Sanskrit. It's basically a corrupt language, and I think a lot of us want to learn classical Latin because it represents our heritage, and so much is tied into that. And but there is a reason why Latin died, and it died because it has a lot of bad, irregular, corrupt grammar and stuff in it. And this is definitely the case with Sanskrit, which I doubt was ever even really a language in the sense that we understand it. And Latin was, even officially used in England until the 1700s, which a lot of people don't know. So the influence of Latin is huge, classical Latin. But for the most part, what you need are Latin roots, and you need to clean up that grammar for it to actually be useful, and for it to be more beautiful, and for it to be a clear tool of communication. So when I'm looking at a language, really what I want out of it is I want to communicate with it, and I also want it on some level to be beautiful or good. I mean, even Dutch would be sort of comical or funny, or Finnish. Every language will have something that makes gives it a cultural value, and then we have to judge how much corruption is in the language. Now, a lot of languages, where the corruption comes from are the scribes, the people in society who profit from language confusion. And a scribe is actually a synonym of the word Jew. So you have a guild which says only we are allowed to write, and you have to pay for us to write. How different is that from today, where Jews control CNN and the entire Western media and much of the Chinese media? I mean, I'll say something about Jews in Chinese, upload it to a Chinese video site, and they'll delete it. So I can tell you the Chinese did not delete that, because Chinese don't understand what are sensitive issues to Jewish people, and they don't understand who Leo Frank was, or I'm just giving you some examples. So if that stuff gets deleted, I know a Jew deleted that, and that there is some degree of media control coming in there. And so I'm talking about that because these scribes are not intelligent people, and that's why they're using these false barriers to protect their profession. They're using these barriers because they're afraid of a sort of a meritocracy. In a meritocracy, Jews would be just beggars on the streets, so they have to invent some stupid pretexts for them to be there, like in French, some 500 changes of a noun, and stuff like that. You have to get a dictionary of nouns, and each page is all 500 different changes on it, and they're irregular and stuff. And does that contribute to the beauty of the language French? Does that make communication better? And the answer on those 2 points is a resounding no. And French is arguably not a beautiful language. The northern French is a bit better. So what are we doing with it then? You really need to sit down and think about that. If your goal is to go toward any Latin, and that means modern Latin or classical Latin, I would recommend doing a simplified Latin first. And this is why I went into Esperanto is because I wanted to learn a simplified Latin that I could remember, not the Latin like I learned in high school, which you'll forget the second you stop studying hard, because you can't even really speak it with anybody, and you don't have a regular usage of it, and all that amazing amount of irregular, crazy stuff is not going to stick in your head at all. And maybe, arguably, it would be better if it didn't stick in your head, because during those days, yes, they did have scribes, and they're discussed in the Bible, and they corrupted the language extremely. And Latin is a crazy language to try to express yourself with. And that affects how much you're expressing. I mean, this is why I'd even recommend playing guitar over playing piano or violin. If I have to practice this instrument for 12 hours a day for 5 years in order to really express myself with it, then in practical terms, I'm not going to have 12 hours for 5 years, so it's never going to be on a level like you could get with practicing an hour a day for 2 years for guitar. And so I think also logical instruments are superior from the beginning, and you'll get further, you'll express yourself more, and you'll increase the beauty. Like really, really advanced guitarists, they work on their tone like crazy. They file their nails in special ways, and to get, they're already digging into deeper levels than 99% of people who ever studied piano or violin ever get into. Not to say that there aren't thousands of masters of piano and violin. You have to ask yourself, do you love this thing so much that you are going to put in that 12 hours a day for those years and really finish the job? And I would say for most people, in most cases, the answer will be no. So what are some simplified Latin that you could go for? Esperanto is 80% Latin, and when it's not Latin, it uses, generally speaking, Germanic stuff when Latin has 2 or 3 meanings for the same root. So Esperanto will change to a German word to express another meaning that is already covered by a Latin root. So all of your main Latin roots are covered in Esperanto, and then they add more. You get German roots, and you get a couple Slavic roots. Not many, but it's a good introduction. It's good to use a little Slavic because we Europeans, we're all brothers, and let's consider some of these things. And finally, the other versions, I think, are not used enough. Like, you have something called Occidental. I bet you didn't ever heard of that before. There's a language that was created called Occidental, and it too is based on Latin, and it's more quote-unquote natural, and that means that it looks more like modern Latin languages, and it's more understandable immediately to the reader. Problem is, it's not as logical, and then as you use it more, it becomes more cumbersome. And Esperanto is the other way around. Esperanto is a little harder to understand when you first start reading it, but then it's so logical and it makes so much sense. I call that natural. I've seen little kids pick up Esperanto really quick, and they just understand everything. They make their plurals. They do a lot of complex grammar stuff because Esperanto has complex Latin grammar. It's just regular, folks. It's not filled with all the corrupt garbage. And that's sort of the advantage of it. You can learn this grammar structure. You can learn accusative case. You can learn, matching plurals, accusatives, and you can learn crazy, like combinations of, passive and gerundive combinations. It's amazing. You can express yourself in ways that are simply not possible with any other language, because because Esperanto is made for us. It was a team effort, I think, from many men over a period of about 10 years. They tested it and tried it and used it, fixed it, and kept making it until it was a really good thing. I don't believe it was created by one Jew. I think that's a lie. Zamenhof did not create Esperanto. They say he created it and he had a big pile of papers to prove it, but his father burned them all. So, I mean, if you believe that, I've got some property in Florida or whatever you would say, because that's always the way it is, right? It's we Jews are the smartest in the world, but all the proof is burned. It's all gone. They massacred 6 million of us, but they burned them all, and we don't even have one body. And okay. You know, if you're gonna lie, you might as well go for the whole big one, huh? So the other one is Simple Latin. There is something called Simple Latin. Wikipedia also has several thousand entries in Simple Latin. There is a small internet group of people that speak Simple Latin. Simple Latin is classical Latin, 100% Latin, that is cleaned up and organized in a way, and they've taken a considerable amount of corruption out of the classical Latin. I think that's also an option for you. So, I mean, I don't want to discourage people from learning classical languages so much, but I think we can let those languages die, and we can erase this corruption. We can de-Jew these languages, and the Jews in the Hindu area there, they come from this Thar desert, and they're from several families, and they are the equivalent of Pharisees over in India, and they ran the banks, and they became quote unquote Brahmins, and they were just lazy butts, and they tried to use this illogical crap to ruin everybody's lives, and don't do it, and especially don't teach this to your kids. Your kids, they don't deserve this stuff. Even Rastus Jones uses a Dvorak keyboard. We got to think ahead. We got to do things logically and comfortably, and sometimes it's not the most popular choice, but somebody should go first. Somebody should be the pioneer. My computer is a Linux computer. I was a pioneer in that. I'm a regular home user. I'm not advanced, and I started using Linux in 2007. And if there were problems, I learned how to fix them. If there was a software that's only in Windows or Mac, I gave it up. And that's because Windows is crap, it's a virus, and Mac costs 10 times more than it should. Mac is good stuff. My sister's an engineer for Mac, and that's fine, but it's not worth it. And it's also not your computer. If you find something wrong on a Mac, which doesn't happen very often, but when you do, you're stuck. And on Linux, you can do anything you damn well want with your computer. It's yours. The whole center programming of it is completely done in just text documents. Your devices are set up according to a simple text document that's 1 page long, and you can read it. Can you do that with a Mac? No, you can't. And so Linux is it's a community effort. They're what we call cool people, and they're not what you expect. Same thing with Esperanto people. We get some opposition to Esperanto, like, are you guys like left-winger, destroy all the races, liberal weirdos, whatever. The fact is quite the opposite. Esperanto community is filled with nationalists, filled with anti-Jewish, anti-Gypsy, and they're proud of their countries, they're proud of their languages, and their goal is to protect their national languages by not having to waste all their time learning irregular, corrupt English. and so, you know, look at that. You thought you understood this, and you get inside, and it's like, well, it's not what I expected. You know, and I would so think ahead of everything. And classical languages, I don't think they're realistic to learn for anybody who's not sitting home at all times. Finally, to all the celibate brothers, you have a lot of time on your hands, and there's projects and things you can do, and learning new languages is a powerful tool to increase your value in the market and to get jobs in places where you would never expect to get a job. You do not need to spend money to learn new languages. You simply learn them for free online. You know, if you're home all day or home a lot and you're celibate, you're not wasting all your time earning money for some vagina and filling this dark hole all the time. You don't have kids that you're feeding, and you don't have like me, I don't even have a dog. You know, you can really make good use of your time to learn new skills. And I think in this part of the Kali Yuga, Jews stepping out, Chinese moving in, very useful skills will be language skills and also handyman skills. And then you'll be on the road making cash wherever you go. So use your time wisely, and I feel for you if you love classical Latin. That was my love when I was in high school, and then I found out the hard way. Learning classical Latin will actually teach you zero classical Latin, or practically, aside from agricola and some puer and a couple other words. You'll forget it all, and you'd be much better off with a version of an uncorrupt Latin as a learning tool, Esperanto, Occidental, or simple Latin, and then take your next step into modern Latin languages, which are corrupt, but they have a lot of crazy, unnatural grammar, but it's not nearly what was in the old classical Latin, which is, sorry to say, rightfully dead. So, home to everybody. Communication. So, when I'm looking at a language, really what I want out of it is I want to communicate with it, and I also want it on some level to be beautiful or good. I mean, even Dutch would be sort of comical or funny, or Finnish. Every language will have something that gives it a cultural value, and so much is tied into that. And but there is a reason why Latin died, and it died because it has a lot of bad, irregular, corrupt grammar and stuff in it. And this is definitely the case with Sanskrit, which I doubt was ever even really a language in the sense that we understand it. And Latin was, even when I had some authority on it, I guess, but I forgot it immediately after getting out of high school, and there's a reason for that. And this also relates to what I was saying about Sanskrit. It's basically a corrupt language, and I think a lot of us want to learn classical Latin because it represents our heritage. And howdy, brothers. So I want to talk about classical Latin a little bit. I studied classical Latin from a Catholic teacher, an Irish Catholic woman, in my high school for 4 years, and I even got a couple awards for our state, the state of Ohio. So I think I learned it for a good deal of time. Officially used in England until the 1700s, which a lot of people don't know. So the influence of Latin is huge, classical Latin. But for the most part, what you need are Latin roots, and you need to clean up that grammar for it to actually be useful, and for it to be more beautiful, and for it to be a clear tool of